Aubrey, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for coming to share your pearls of wisdom with us. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Well, let's start by you telling us a little bit about yourself and tell us what's not in your bio. That's always the most interesting part. And what motivates you to do what you do?
I feel like I have a really clear understanding of what I came here to do. And I know that's kind of a loaded way to describe your existence, but I really feel like our existence with an opportunity and an invitation to fulfill some sense of purpose. And I think it's our job to uncover what that purpose is. And that gives really clear guidepost and a way to kind of look forward towards our life and understand which direction we're heading. And I think for me, it's always been to just help evolve the way that people think, the way that people can access their spiritual truth, mental truth, physical truth, and just try and, leave this place a better place than when I found it.
That's great. And you help people do that so well, which is incredible. You've faced a lot of obstacles in your personal and your professional life. How have you dealt with those obstacles? Because that's something that people, ask me a lot. And we know that adversity breeds, gives us the resilience. And most people that have been through adverse circumstances, they always learn and they grow forward. And so we know that we know as humans that obstacles are actually quite good for us. But can you tell us how you've navigated obstacles in your professional life, and what lessons have you learned that we can learn from you?
I think the most important thing is to reframe an obstacle as your, like as Ryan Holiday wrote in his book, The Obstacle is a Way, like your resistance is your assistance. I would be like going into the weight room and saying, oh, these weights are an obstacle. Oh, poor me, look at all these weights everywhere. They're so heavy. Well, the weights are there so that your physical body to be able to be stronger, and the obstacles are there to train your mind, your emotional body, your spiritual body. It's in the same way. So if you reframe it like that, you can say, instead of, oh, woe is me when something happens, like, oh, wow, look at this opportunity I have to face this challenge, to overcome this challenge, to grow stronger in the face of this challenge, and see myself on the other side, a different person than before I started.
Do you find that that's what's helped you whenever you hit an obstacle? Is that sort of the mindset that you bring to the table?
Sure. It's just, all of the challenges that I faced, and this is the same for most people, we've always overcome them. We're batting 1,000. We're 100% at overcoming the obstacles, but then we'll face a new obstacle and be like, oh man, this is the one. This is the one that's going to take me out for sure. But it never is. Always grateful for them in hindsight. And so I think the skill is to be grateful for them and with foresight. So to see the obstacle coming and be like, oh, wow, I'm going to be grateful for this later. So I might as well be grateful for it now. And if I can be grateful for it now, maybe I don't know why yet, but then it just changes your whole attitude toward it. And you can go towards it with curiosity and just solve the puzzle in the way that you need to.
I love how you've explained that. I do clinical trials, and I just did a set of clinical trials. I work on the mind-brain connection and been doing it for 38 years now. And one of the concepts that I've done a lot of research on is the concept of reconceptualization, which is what you're saying. It's reframing, it's seeing things in a different way. And it's amazing when people learn that skill, because it really is something you actually have to learn to do. And you can train yourself to become better and better. It just changes how the unconscious mind and the brain function, which then carries over into how we consciously function. So it's very scientific. I mean, it shifts the whole flow of energy in the brain, and it shifts how our brain is wired and everything. So it's a very important concept to adopt. I love your foresight idea, though. I love the idea of, we've been through obstacles in the past. We've been very good in an obstacle situation, forgetting, aren't we, that actually we got through quite a lot in the past, and we take each new thing as though this is the end of the world, and then think, oh well, but we've got all these skills we've already gained from our previous experiences, and we can bring that to the table and have that foresight. I love that shift. Here's an obstacle, not oh woe is me, but rather, hey, this is great. I've got this previous experience, I've succeeded before. Let me be grateful for this, even though it's awful, terrible, whatever it may be. If I'm hearing you correctly, that's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and do you find that people get a hang of this? Do you find that they apply it, or how do you get people to apply that thinking? Because we kind of know we should do that. What's the key to getting people to do that, to see the world in that way?
I think it's something that just you start to get more used to. And as you have that mental framework and you can really analyze everything and then start to build those wins. And even if in a particular instance, you have those moments of dread and those moments of doubt and those moments where you kind of want to retreat and just crawl in a hole and not do anything, which is sometimes the reaction in the face of these challenges. If you have the idea that you're for this later, and at least that's in your head somewhere, and then you get through it, and then you're grateful for that, and then you're like, oh wow, that was another one where that truism was correct, that I was grateful for this ultimately, and it just starts to build the confidence in the concept. And I think it just takes the time. But the first thing is the seed. So hopefully for the listeners here, like, that seed has been planted. Some of you, maybe the seed is going to flourish and you'll be able to adopt this kind of mentality. For others, maybe it'll take some time, but maybe you'll think about it next time you have a challenge, and you'll think about it after the challenge, and you'll be able to reframe and kind of look back at your own history and see how often it was true. And I think it just starts to gain momentum. So I don't think it's something that has to be wholesale and immediately adopted. That's hard for the brain to do. But it's something that will build momentum and start to carry forward with a little more gravity every time you practice it.
Very good. So you're actually building up the thing. One of the things that I've researched is that whole myth that we're going to change a habit, build a habit in 21 days. It doesn't take 21 days. It takes at least 63. And I've just done research showing that whole neuroplasticity change in the brain. And it goes to what you're saying. You're not going to, like, we can hear you and I discuss this now. Someone can be hearing you and I discuss this concept. Okay, reframe an obstacle as something positive. But it's going to take you at least, if you've never done that, it's going to take you at least 63 days to even get your head around that concept, and to start then applying it and looking at your past and the future in a different way. So that's good for people to, it's that whole thing of cumulative, a little bit each day is so important. Micro progression, and it's very scientific. Your brain works like that, but it's driven by your mind. But it is so important for people to realize that it's at least 9 weeks before you will start actually seeing behavioral change in your brain. And the way you described it is excellent. I love that. So you've interviewed some of the brightest minds in athletics and business and science and relationships and spirituality. What are some of the best pieces of advice? And I'm sure you have tons. So this is a hard question. Best pieces of advice and wisdom that you've heard from these guests. And what really stood out to you, or maybe a few things that stood out to you?
Well, I mean, one of the things that's somewhat related is just the people who I've talked to have a really strong gratitude practice. So
that's great. Mm-hmm.
Joanne, who I interviewed, and Jesse Itzler, successful businessman, part owner of the Atlanta, both of them have really strong gratitude practices where they actively go about accessing that sentiment and that feeling of gratitude for any aspect of their current life, their future life, or their past life. And they are two of the happiest and most reconciled people that I know. And I can only attribute that to the gratitude practice that they have. So that's definitely one of the key aspects. Certainly a lot of the other people in certain people in business and athletics, there's always a piece of magic that they have. There's something I was like, oh, I get it. Like, I get why you are who you are. Like, I understand what drove you and what allowed you. I think there's this idea that some people are just, have a crazy amount of talent and they couldn't help but succeed. And I've almost never seen that before.
No.
It's always coupled with some kind of mental framework or practice or some kind of unusual outlier behavior that's like, okay, like, I see what you're doing there. And, there's so many different ways that could be. For some, it's just a way to reframe their understanding of what discomfort is, and like actually seeking and looking forward towards the discomfort, like choosing your own willingly. I think Joe Rogan is a great, Tim Kennedy is another great example. He's a top UFC fighter and a decorated military veteran. And he's someone who'll go out and he'll try to see what can make him fail, and he'll look for his fail points as fast as possible. So, and I think that was a really cool concept to have. Like, try to fail, try to find something that'll make you fail, and he'll like hunt those things. So
wow.
He's faced with the situation in which he's, feeling really, he knows what he's really made of. And that's, that's something that Peterson was on my podcast. He mentioned, you don't know yourself unless you test yourself. So everybody really who's been successful, they're willing to put themselves on the line, and they're willing to fail, and they're willing to, to go up against something great and see where they stand, and not judge. And they don't have a fragile ego identity construct to protect. They're willing to fail. They're willing to put themselves up against immense challenge and see how they do. And if they fall, they dust themselves off. And if they don't, they keep going and find the next one.
Those are such important points that you've raised, and such logical, almost instinctive, but in our current culture of self-help and positivity, it's almost counter, you've got to win, and you've got to always be positive and smiling and everything. It's almost counter to that, because you imagine that you can get the best and you can attract the best to you, and all these different sort of positive psychology type philosophies that have made it seem like it's something external that you can get and just put in you, and now you're going to be this person that's going to succeed and whatever. And meanwhile, it's actually really the basics. It's the basics of, as you say, gratitude and being willing to fail and get up again, and seeing the success and the learning, the lessons in the failure. And it's consistent. I've interviewed so many people, and those same sort of things come up, and it's like you have, and it's amazing how those core things are the things that make people keep moving forward. It's quite fascinating. So would you say that the common mindset amongst these people is this willingness to, almost like the willingness to learn from the failure? Would you say, if you had to, or a couple, would there be a few more than just one mindset? I think not just one.
Well, I think that's absolutely necessary. Is like if you're a comedian, you have to be willing to bomb. If you're an athlete, you have to be willing to miss. If you're a businessman, you have to be willing to have a bad idea and then fold it and not be attached to it, just scrap it. And
that's good.
Like, you have to be able to learn, adapt, adjust, and not take things so personally. Like, I think we're all too fragile in our identity. So we're not willing to put ourselves in a vulnerable position where we could judge ourselves less for not succeeding in some external way. And I think that's really the defining factor is, those people, they're just willing to put their ass on the line. And whether that's in any aspect, it's just the willingness to be vulnerable enough to have criticism, to lose, to not, to allow people to hurl their abuses at them, and also not take the praise and compliments too seriously either. It's just like they're going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to learn everything they can along the way. But it's just this kind of anti-fragility where they're just comfortable in expressing themselves and going for it.
I love that the phrase you've used, anti-fragility. I think that's extremely important in this day and age. And also I love the idea of brilliant, the way you said being willing to take an idea, try it fails, and fold that idea and try again without thinking, oh, it's so terrible, this is it and this is the end, which is a very common kind of mindset that I've encountered in the work that I do with people. Is it's like something hits you and it's that's the end of the world. But you've got to be willing to say it's not the end of the world. That's just something that didn't work. Let me go to the next thing. And I love the point that you make about criticism. People do fold under criticism and fall apart. And the praise thing, don't look for do things looking for the praise. It's too empty. It's not enough. It may not even be genuine, and not to live just based on that, and not to let it go to your head either. You've raised some extremely important points for, I think, successful living. Really excellent. You're really passionate about psychedelic medicine and organizations like MAPS and the Hefter Institute. Can you talk about this? Because this is really an area that's very interesting and also very controversial. It's also got quite a long history and been going up and down in terms of science and research and being accepted in the mainstream and so on.
I think that's actually not necessarily true right now, because if you look at the work that MAPS is doing, they're in phase 3 clinical trials for
that's right,
stress disorder, and it's MDMA assisted psychotherapy. So they have a protocol, and what the data has shown from the phase 2 trials is that 2 out of 3 treatment resistant patients not only were treated for their PTSD, so this is treatment resistant. I've tried all the other psychiatric medication, all the other practices, EMDR, everything, nothing's working. In 3 sessions, 2 out of every 3 of those treatment-resistant patients that nothing else could cure were cured, not treated, cured. And then in a follow-up study, they showed that not only were they cured, which is dropping the trauma score beneath the threshold. I think the number is like 10 out of 55. If you're below 10, then you have considered to have no trauma, but it's continued to drop. So if they were at 9, in 2 years, they're at 7. And that's
amazing.
So it continues on. This is a lifelong cure is what they're showing. So it's really a revolution in the way that we process trauma. And if you start to dive deeper into the research about how many things are related to trauma, I think the study is the ACE study, which shows that for every traumatic incident, you have an increase in depression, you have an increase in the propensity to be obese, you have an increase in addiction, and all of these things are so based upon these traumas that are really difficult to access. And I think that's probably why not only the compelling data, but also, everything that's really this is shown is why the FDA and also the safety protocols have been great in these programs. And it's 3 interventions. It's not, you don't have to take this pill all the time, but the FDA granted them fast track breakthrough drug status, which was a great.
That's fantastic.
And then in the interim analysis, which they just announced, so they didn't list this, and that's so the FDA can say, all right, based on the results, it looks like your study is underpowered. You need to add more, patients or whatever. They go right ahead. So it looks like it's really cleared to be a fully approved treatment with all of the scientific backing that you could ever hope for. So
it's definitely changed. Yeah, it's definitely changed because
it's gone out of the realm of controversy and into
the realm.
This is in the realms. So that's beautiful, and that's the thing that I think is going to change, has the opportunity to change society in a really dramatic way, because I think we underestimate the effect that trauma has, just if we're just looking at this kind of narrow field. And so many of us have trauma from so many different things. And of course, trauma is subjective. It's not, because this person had this and I had this, that mine doesn't count and theirs counts. It's not relative. It's individual and subjective. And I think if people can heal these traumatic incidences in their life, they're just going to see a universal lift in every aspect of their experience. And I've been fortunate enough to witness one of these treatments happen. And what I saw was a man who's a really successful businessman, actually, who went in not really knowing what was going on, but he had a variety of different symptoms, uncovered, repressed sexual from his childhood. And on the arc of awareness, shock, anger, sadness, and then into acceptance, forgiveness, and ultimately like that little tinge of gratitude, because he recognized that this was one of the things that drove him to be so successful, And so I watched that whole arc. In traditional talk therapy, that arc, if even possible, would take years, like years to get through that whole and have it fully expressed. And I watched that happen in 4 hours. And so that's what about this. It's not a panacea. It's not for everybody, and it's not the solution for it. But what I've seen it capable of doing is it's a real revolution in my understanding of what's possible for healing the human organism.
I love that, and I agree with you. I think I'm glad that it's not as controversial. It has been, as you said, and it's not as controversial now. And I've worked for 38 years in mind, brain, and trauma and that kind of stuff. And it is really once we can manage our minds, we can sustain the healing. And I've shown with some of my work that you can control depression, anxiety from trauma and so on by 80% up to 80% with mind management. But the key very often, and this is where I think that there's such a lot of room for psychedelic medicine, is to get people to the point where they can actually crack that, because we're so protective. We build such a lot of protection in our brain. I mean, my thoughts are real things. They have structural. They have you make the mind and brain work together. You get structural change in your brain, and you can almost seal up. You can seal up that pain because it's so hard to deal with. And so sometimes just to be able to crack that open, it is, as you say, it's not a panacea, but it's certainly something that I am so thrilled in my line of work that is being investigated, because we need to do everything we can to help people in extreme trauma. And as you quite rightly say, everyone is experiencing trauma and has and is in different ways, and it's so subjective. So we can never be an expert on anyone else's trauma. But if someone's locked it up, you can't do anything. And if this is a way of helping people to release, as you say, in 4 hours, you saw someone's life transform. And I've read quite a few studies and watched a few things about that. And I agree, if that's we should take every tool we have to be able to help us as humans, to be able to process through what we've gone through, because life is hard, and if it works, we shouldn't be frightened. And that's what I like about science. We have to keep our minds open, and not everyone does have an open mind, but that's why we do what we do, to try and open people's minds to different ways of thinking. So, no, it's excellent. I'm excited about this research. I think it's fantastic. You wrote an amazing book called Own the Day, Own Your Life. Love the title. Can you talk about this book and why did you write it and who it's for? Sounds like it's for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, the human body is our home. Wherever we go, we bring that with us, and getting to a level where we can optimize the functionality of our body and understand how it works, I think is important. There is no user manual that we get for being human. And so this was my efforts to, at least as far as the physical expression of it, and it taps into some of the mental aspects, but as part of the physical expression, this is as close as I could get to a user manual that's broken down to the best optimal practices in a single hypothetical day. And it's a day that really reflects what I feel like is a day that people could repeat ad infinitum. Like, it's not a day that's a special day. Like, I'm going to own the day on July 23rd. And like, this is a day that you can do most, if not all of this stuff every single day. You know, it's just kind of subtle changes to reframe how you go through the day and add in some things. And so, yeah, I feel like that was an important thing to get out. It's closely related to my company On It, which is a human optimization brand that I built. But the book doesn't, talks about so much more. I mean, we talk more about the free medicinable, which are, the ability to breathe, the ability to access hot and cold, to exercise, to have sex, to sleep, all of these things that have these massive lifts for the organism as a whole, which are easily accessible and available to all of us.
That's one of my favorite things. You talk about the six best miracle drugs on the planet are free. I mean, I love that concept, and just and you're a big friend of Wim Hof, and I've also interviewed him a couple of times. In fact, we're going to be doing some research together, him and myself, and which I'm very excited about. And I mean, I was just talking yesterday to someone and talking about how I was interviewing someone about how cutting and body harming in terms of dealing with trauma and stuff and how to manage that. And I was thinking afterwards that one of Wim Hof's breathing methods, just breathing and just that way of putting one's body into the reset mode, which will happen when you do that kind of breathing that he teaches, how that's a free thing, but it enables you to be able to reset yourself. And then when I was preparing for your interview, I was thinking of that and thinking of how we've got so much that we can use to be able to help ourselves forward as well. So that's what I loved about your 6 best miracle drugs. So can you talk a little bit more? You've mentioned briefly, obviously breathing is one. Just tell us a couple more about the 6 best miracle drugs that are free. People love the word free.
Well, sleep, sleep is one of those big ones. There's whole books written about sleep. And when I read the book from Nick Littlehale, I thought that was a really important way that he framed it, where most of us focus on how much sleep we get in a given night. Littlehale's worked with a lot of the top performers in the world. Manchester United is a football team and a variety of different performers. And what he recognized is that more important than a single night's sleep is how many sleep cycles you get in a week.
Such a great concept.
Yeah, so he estimates the sleep cycle is rough. So all of us are hooked up to any kind of biofeedback device that'll give us an accurate readout of what that looks like. But if we assume 90 minutes is a sleep cycle, and so you can kind of count your hours, and then you really try to get to 40 hours a week. So you're basically trying to get to 30 sleep cycles a week was the
30 a week. Okay.
Yeah. Then at that point, you have the ability to assess, like whether you're getting, like how many you're getting, 30 to 35. You can set your goal. But if you got a few less, so let's say you only slept, 6 hours. So you got potentially 4 sleep cycles, give or take, rough in a single.
Yeah.
Night. So that means that, all right, maybe one of the next nights you need to get 5 sleep cycles, get a full 7.5 hours of sleep. And then and if it's a really rough night and you only got 4.5, like later in the week, you can catch up and get the rest. And I think that concept takes a lot of the pressure off of sleep, which is one of the big issues that we have, is we start to feel like, oh, if I don't get this sleep, my whole
life's going to fall apart. Yeah. Because every study is saying you're going to die, sleep or die, but no one tells you how to sleep. So you panic so much about not sleeping that you're even worse off when you've done more brain damage.
Yeah, exactly. and he also counts taking a 30-minute or even a 90-minute nap if you have the time, but even a 30-minute nap, he counts that as a sleep cycle.
That's amazing.
It's really, I've added a lot more napping, taking 30-minute naps into my own life. And I find that even if I get, a limited amount of sleep, like even last night, I didn't sleep great. I was out playing a sport called pickleball late.
Sounds fun.
And it was super fun. It kept me up late. But so I didn't sleep too much last night, but I know I'll go home and I'll get at least one 30-minute nap, and then I'll catch up on some more sleep tomorrow. And so it's not stressful.
So good. That's brilliant. That in itself is a gold mine that you just said there, because it's just one thing that me, as you know, everyone out there saying, every single lifestyle wellness writer is saying sleep, sleep, sleep. So we all know, but everyone's so busy worrying about sleeping that they're not sleeping. So I love your approach, and I love that because I speak a lot about that too. And I love the fact that you're saying the sleep cycle. That's just such a simple way, a great way of looking at it, and taking it over a period of time like a week, which is a manageable and conceptually a very manageable amount. Because there are some days that I've just finished my 18th book. There's nights that I've worked till 4 a.m. and I've had 2 hours of sleep and I've had to do a whole day of interviews or whatever. But then the next night, as you say, you catch up. So I never let it worry me if I'm not sleeping. But people are so trained in this current narrative to, I've got to sleep or I'm going to cause every single thing that's going to kill you. He's going to die. And that's what people are more fearful of that than anything else. So I love your approach to that. I think that's absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, I think it's important. And also the way that your mind thinks about things, the mind-body connection is so
huge,
underestimated as well. So you actually think, if you wake up and you think, oh, I didn't sleep, all of these terrible things are going to happen. They're way more likely to happen. It's the nocebo effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas if you have that positive mentality about it, like, oh, no worries, like I'm going to be fine. I'll catch up on it tomorrow. And that kind of positive attitude is going to bleed out into your life as well and make a significant impact too.
Totally agree with you. The clinical trial I just did now, because I've been doing mind-body research for 38 years. So thank you for saying people really underestimate it. And that's why I'm so hot on doing research in this area. And we found just getting our subjects mind management tools where we're also telling them, don't worry about the sleep. If you get bad one night, you'll catch up at some point. Just that little shift, we found a 25% increase in sleep quality, like literally in the first 3 weeks of trial, which was, and it was sustained at 6 months. It was just getting better and better and better and better. And that was just removing the fear. There wasn't even a technique involved. Like, you've actually given a brilliant technique. That was more just the technique behind it was pure mind management, which is what I developed. But it was just taking the mind management off the pressure of not being able to sleep and just embracing it and using the time for something else and whatever. And it shifted the whole perspective. So I love how you handle the sleep. That's so good.
Great. And for people who want more of the research that we were able to find for other stuff,
it's in the book.
In the day.
Yeah. So the book they can find. We'll put the link in the show notes. But everywhere where books are sold,
Audible, Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
There's no excuse not to get this book. It's fantastic. Yeah, I love it. I love it. So nice. Tell us another, maybe one more.
Well, I think the other thing is light. Underestimate the importance of light. We're inside under fluorescent lights all the time. And light has like our circadian rhythm, which I'm sure is something you've talked about. Mm-hmm. But getting light when you first wake up is really important. So ideally, you'll sunlight and get out there and just allow that light to not only interact with the photoreceptors in your eyes, but we also have photoreceptors in our inner ear and other different places as well. So just getting that wash of light will start our circadian rhythm, which regulates our energy, our hormone production, a variety of different things. And it's the thing that's going to get your day started. And then,
so good.
Of course, towards the end of the night, managing light to try and mimic darkness as much as you can. So eliminating blue light, turning off your screens, kind of easing yourself into the evening with less light. So important. So light at the start, light at the end. I think that's another one of the natural doctors that we have available. Dr. Light, Dr. Sleep.
Love it.
Obviously, exercise, sex, a lot of these things that people probably have a pretty good handle on. Sex, a lot of times people just think about it for pleasure, but if you really look at
so healthy,
it's so good for the organism. I mean, so many of the things that we're naturally designed to do are really productive. So getting back to those different states, hydration, obviously, we lose like a pound of water overnight just expelling the moisturized air from our lungs.
Amazing.
And then breathing in the drier air. That's why we lose so much weight. That's why we're lighter in the morning. Some people think it's just magic, like we give it
to the tooth fairy.
It's water weight.
Yeah.
So making sure that you're hydrated. So I recommend, what I call the morning mineral cocktail, which is a combination of water and Himalayan sea salt to make sure that you get the electrolytes lost, because we're a saltwater organism. We're not a freshwater organism. So if you're losing either through sweat or even through exhalation overnight, we're losing salt water, but we're gaining And if we only put in distilled water, for example, we're just going into a mineral deficit. So adding in those minerals and electrolytes is crucial.
Crucial for hormone, everything. Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. So that's another one, and then breath, of course, any way that you can practice conscious breathing into your belly. There's a Japanese study that I cite in the book that showed with 6 deep breaths, they were able to prove a change in blood pressure. So, everybody says, take a deep breath, if you're kind of flustered or frustrated.
Yeah.
1 may not be enough, but science shows that 6 is the magic number. 5 won't do it, but 6 will.
6 does it. Amazing.
Yeah. And that's pretty simple. I mean, that takes 45 seconds.
Exactly.
Really easy.
That's incredible. So what you've done is taken what people are hearing all over the place, but you've got the scientific studies and you've put that into a nice, neat little simple to-do list that is something you can just, it's a lifestyle. I mean, it's something that's so actually easy to incorporate. So instead of trying to make it a big deal and, I've got to do this, it's all in one place and you can just apply it and start using it and transforming your life, the basics. I love how we're in an era that we are finally going back to the basics again. The scientific era has been amazing in terms of development, but we've gone backwards in terms of a lot of our lifestyle issues, and people are dying younger. I mean, the population studies are quite frightening in terms of us not managing our minds enough to manage these basic principles that you talk about. So it's good that there's so much more awareness now. There's a definite shift. I've noticed this in the 38 years I've been in this field. There's such a shift back to basic principles, and your book encapsulates that really well, really, really well. You also talk about, I love this one, you talk about the key to making a miserable job work for you. Can you share more on this? And this is a question I get a lot of. I hate my job, and how am I supposed to make it work for me, Dr. Leaf, and give it. So here we go. Give us some wise advice on that, Aubrey.
I mean, it's interesting times right now. I mean, I wrote the book obviously prior to the quarantine and lockdown.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many people are actually going to the office anymore, period. I mean,
so
I know some people are, but them at home. So this is an interesting way that I think work in general is going to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's going to be, obviously, if you want, the information about, I'll encourage you to read the book, but it's a little bit more interesting to me to talk about what's happening now.
Yeah, go for it.
Interesting to explore. As we're working from home, I think we have all of the different comforts that our home provides. So it's a lot easier. The things I recommend, like having a rebounder trampoline, something to get the blood moving, something to that you can do so you're not just sedentary and sitting or going for a walk. All of these things are easier. There's no micromanagement in your own house. And if there is, you need to talk to the people who live in the house.
Exactly. Change it.
Yeah. So all of these things that I was trying to find ways that people who are in a cubicle could kind of game the system a little bit, take a nap in their car. And, if they had an hour for lunch, eat 30 minutes and nap 30 minutes in the car if they were tired or
so good.
You're by your bed. So
you can do it.
You can do it. Yeah. So many of the practices are more available. The challenges come in. What you don't want to do is make your whole home your office, because the energy of what you're doing in a certain place is going to carry in. So one of the worst things you can do is turn your bed into your workspace, right? Like, do your bed. I mean, fine, bring your laptop in there or whatever, but really try to do the majority of your work in a designated space. So that's your workspace. And then also let anybody you're living with and the people know, this is your work time. And it's really not okay to interrupt during the work time, because otherwise things start to blend.
Yeah.
And the productivity really drops. I'm writing my next book. I just got married, and it's a new,
congratulations.
Thank you. And it's beautiful. And we always want to be around each other. And to even explain, even coming in to ask me if I want a cup of tea, which is a very sweet thing to do. If I'm in the middle of writing,
you don't want to be interrupted. Yeah.
I can't really receive that interruption, even as well-intentioned and delightful and how much I'd love to see you. This is my work time.
Yeah.
And I have to really just isolate that time. And so it really teaches us boundary. And I think that's a really key thing, a boundary of both space and a boundary of time, and forces us to be our own create our own schedule.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that, because my husband and I work together, and I've got 4 kids, and 2 of them work with me as well. And you've got to be careful. Like last night, I love having a sauna, and I've got an infrared sauna, and I was in the sauna, and I was just switching off from a really busy day. And then suddenly my husband's texting me all these little business things, and I'm saying, hey, in this hour, I'm not going to. And, it's like, and that's how easy it is, because we're so used to just working all the time that we actually will be going on a walk with the family, and suddenly we'll jump in because it's so easy. It's a family business. So we start talking business stuff. And we actually say, my one daughter, she's really good. She's actually my producer. She'll say, it's boundaries now. Now it's relaxation time. No work talk now. And you have to bring those disciplines in. You have to do that separation, create those boundaries. Otherwise, it becomes one big blend. And even if you love what you do, which is obviously what you do, is obviously what we do, you've got to have that mental space where you do switch off and reboot your brain, because your mind keeps going 24/7 at 400 billion actions per second. And that's some of the science I've worked on, but your brain gets exhausted. And if you don't let your brain reboot, you can feeling anxiety, or that sense of, hovering angst and that kind of stuff. And it's often because we just haven't created a boundary or separated out and everything. So I'm really glad you raised that point. And that's a very good way of actually making a job less miserable.
No doubt. Yeah. And, there's going to be at home or at work, there's going to be challenging energies that come up. And, I think there's a lot of different practices to be able to deal with that. And I think that's obviously really important. If somebody, typically we tend to avoid the uncomfortable conversations until it's so uncomfortable for us and it's so painful that we just explode, and then we react the wrong way. They're more and more the lesson that I keep learning, whether it's a personal relationship or a work relationship. If something is bothering you, if something is troubling you, talk about it immediately.
Yeah, don't leave it.
Don't leave it, because if you can address it immediately without it really causing you to have a massive emotional reaction, it's going to be received a lot better. You're going to be able to nip it in the bud. You're going to be able to prevent the resentment and all of these kind of...
all the assumptions that are built in that interim period. Yeah.
So just, handle it as quickly as possible. And that's a lesson that I learned and over again, is just don't let these things build up. You think you can tolerate it. Yeah, I can deal with it. No big deal. Well, maybe you can now and the next time and the next time, but the fourth time that happens, you're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah. And then it might be
all of the frustration from the last 3 times, it's all going to pile on, and you're going to give them all that entire release.
And then there's going to be some silly little trigger it seems so irrelevant, but it's going to explode you. And then you have this huge big fight with you or whatever, and everyone feels terrible. And there's so much unpacking. You can fix that, but you could also prevent that.
Yep, exactly.
Which is really, really great. I love the idea of, even if, let's say, those people that are physically at work, because there's a lot of people that also still are, is to go take a nap for 30 minutes in your car at lunchtime. That's so, I teach a lot on thinker moments, which is so important for resetting your brain. So determining with your mind to just switch off to the external and switch on to the internal. And you can go and get in your car and you can do that and take that nap. And I love that you encourage people to take naps. That's just so good. People think that, they're being lazy. No, you are. It's so good for health to take, even if it's a 5-minute nap. It really does help. And that's practical.
There's a study that I have in the sleep chapter of my book that showed that a nap outperformed both a longer overnight sleep and a cup of coffee as far as mental alertness.
I've read that study. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Those 10-minute naps, those little naps are not being lazy. Those are pure superpower activation tools. So, yeah, they really are wonderful. They're fantastic. Okay, in this book, you also, I love this too. I love the way how you say things. In this book, you discuss how you are probably screwing up your most attractive traits to your partner. Can you expand on this, and how do we remedy this?
People will take you at your own estimation of yourself is another like big lesson. If you, no matter what you are, if you don't actually fully believe that, or you downplay that, or you don't, like, it doesn't matter how good looking you are. If you're constantly insecure about how you look, then that's going to actually be the thing that people read. Like, he's not as good looking or whatever. But if you're confident and you just, not cocky and not being like showy, but just really truly like appreciate yourself for all of these things, people will appreciate you. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson is just really appreciate and love yourself and love all of those things about yourself. And people were going to love those same things. They'll take your cue, they'll trust you, they'll take you at your own estimation of yourself. Dad taught me when I was really young. It's like people will take you at your own estimation of yourself if it's true, because who knows you better than you?
Exactly.
So if people can read like, oh, wow, this person really believes in himself, or he really believes that he's going to do this. I mean, when I went to go raise funding to start on it, I remember both of the people I've raised like $100,000, $110,000 to be exact. And it was from two different people. And I wrote out a whole business plan and I had a whole idea. And obviously what ended up happening was way different than the business plan.
Yeah. It's always like that. Yeah.
Expected. But nonetheless, I handed it to them and they looked through it like a flip book and they were like, okay. And then they looked me right in the eye and they're both of them, not without talking to each other, it was separate. They said the same thing. They looked at me and they're like, this is going to work. And I was like, yes, I do. And they're like, okay, I'm in. Like that was it. Like
that's amazing.
They really just, they trusted that I was sensible enough that if I really believed it, if I truly believed it, they believed it too. And I think that's really the lesson here is that, people will take you at your own level of self-belief, your own level of self-love, your own level of, self-worth.
That's amazing because you project that, and that's what people, so they were more interested in you, how you saw yourself and the confidence you had in yourself than they were in this great business plan. And that was just the sort of cherry on the top. They were more interested in the connection with you. So that's the message there is that be confident in yourself and, the good and the bad. And that's what you project. It's so scientific as well, because when our identity is compromised and we start sort of almost sabotaging ourselves, that's a physical thing that also happens in the brain with that whole mind-brain connection. So whatever you're doing with your mind, you're going to build that into your brain. And I always use this little tree as a toxic thought because your thoughts, which have got memories in them, they look like trees in your brain and we sabotage ourselves. And these, like Einstein's work, they generate energy. So if you are thinking, oh, I can't do this and gee, this guy's never going to, these people won't fund me and I just, this is a stupid idea. And then you're trying to convince you, that's what they're going to see. That's going to generate that toxic energy versus if you have a healthy tree. So I always use for a healthy tree because the thoughts look like trees. So that's what, there's science behind what you're saying. We really need to be authentic with ourselves and generate that in communication with people. So I think that's a very, very important point that you've raised. Are you concerned about anything that's happening out there in the whole self-help wellness industry? Because it's huge at the moment. It's a good thing. There's so much great stuff coming up. But do you have any concerns about anything and do you have any pros and cons? So you can is there something you're worried about or is there something you're particularly happy about or excited about?
Within the industry itself, the hardest thing is when people get kind of lost in spiritual materialism. And that's when really you're flaunting without being aware of it, you're flaunting your spirituality in a way as a kind of a signifier of virtue of your kind of spiritual wealth.
Wow, that's such a good point.
Which is the antithesis of true spirituality. And I think that's something that I see that's particularly disgusting to me is that sense of spiritual materialism. It's like going to do ayahuasca. So you get the merit badge on your vest and then you just show everybody and you tell them how you did it. And that's, I think, one of the things, and that can happen in a variety of different ways. It could happen, somebody goes through a biofeedback brain training, they're like, I've got the brain training of 40 years of Zen, meditation. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, I don't know what metric you're using, but it's not the same. I promise you, I'm sure that I know biofeedback. Don't compare it to 40 years of Zen meditation.
Definitely not.
It's not the same.
For sure, yeah.
And so I think, but that's a way that I think people can kind of be more about the show than about like actually embodying the work that they're talking about. So
where it manifests in their behavior as opposed to show the badge and tell the person, let's see, how are you manifesting? Because if there's true spiritual growth, you're going to be operating in a lot more love and wisdom. And you're just a much nicer person to be around, more human kind of thing.
And that's it. And so the pros are the opposite. The things that I really love the most is when somebody is really embodied. Like if someone's talking to me about their gratitude practice, but I don't see them as grateful, then I'm like, what are you talking about? If someone's talking to me about fitness and they're not fit, I'm like, really? Like you really, the way to be compelling is to live your message, and to really walk the walks. And I see a lot of that, and those are the people who I'm always, always pull up a chair and listen, because they're really embodying the work. Other people, it's just all about the talk, and I'm not so much into the talk.
I am so pleased you raised this point. It's such a relevant point, and it's excellent. It's brilliant that because we are in a day and an age where the access to knowledge is huge, and you can really, it's so easy to do a multiplicity of courses and read a multiplicity of books and say, I've done this, this, and this, but then you're still sitting there, as you say, not training, not eating properly, still whining about everything, complaining, woe is me, victim mentality, and there's no growth. But I've done all these courses. So there's that disconnect, that cognitive dissonance, and there's a lot of that. It's people are not applying knowledge. So thank you. That is a really good point you've raised. Explained that so well. Any more pearls of wisdom that you would like to share? So a closing statement or a...
I think the key thing is just be good to yourself. I think we get in this idea that we need to be really hard on ourselves, and we need to use this kind of stern taskmaster judge. Our inner critic gets really activated, and we think that we need that, when really that's just going to prevent us from having the courage to go forward and take risks and take chances. So, be mindful of those voices of criticism and judgment. Try to soften the edges. Try to understand that even though those voices are here to help us, that's originally what they're doing. They may not be doing it in the best way. Like a good coach versus a bad coach. A bad coach is always telling you how much you suck and, making you run laps and punishing you. A good coach is giving you high fives and telling you that you got this, and, you're good enough and you can do this, and it's okay if you fail and you'll get them next time. And that's the good coach. And that trying to change the way that our own internal voices go, just being kind, being loving, love as much as possible, knowing that all of this is a practice, whether we're working with our inner judge or working with self-love or working with forgiveness or gratitude, it's all a practice. Or the kind of stoic looking at these obstacles as ways that you can refine your strength and gain assistance from the challenge. Like all of these things are practices, but to do so without that kind of air of judgment and harshness and punishment, and really just be good to yourself.
That's beautiful. And I honestly think you're doing that, just having this conversation with you, I really feel better. And it's just you've got a very calming voice, and you obviously live what you live the principles that you're teaching. And thank you for that. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I've enjoyed it so much. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much. It's just, you've got a tremendous insight into the sort of peacefulness of being a human. If that makes any sense, that's how, if I had to, it's beautiful. It's really great, and it's very calming, and it's very encouraging and very hopeful. So thank you so much, and I'd love to have a conversation with you again. I'd love to do this again sometime.
That'd be great. I'd love for you to get an advanced copy of my book too, because I would have a lot of things to think about it.
I would love to. I'd be absolutely honored. Please send me one. That'll be amazing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you.